Okay, and we are all set on the recording and live stream
And it
side.
looks like it is now 5:30 on January 27th. My name is Jim Brewer. I'm the hearings officer for the city of Salem. I'm going to go through some procedures tonight. We have one thing on the hearing officer agenda. It is a zone change ZC 20-02. There's going to be a particular order for tonight's proceedings, but due to the pandemic, in order to comply with social distancing measures that are really in place to help stop the spread of the COVID-19 virus, we're doing this hearing digitally, and people who wish to testify must have already signed in with the recording secretary prior to 3 p.m. today. And it looks like we do have some people who have done that. And we're glad you're here this evening. The order of tonight's proceedings are going to be a staff report presented by Aaron Panko. Then we'll move to the applicant's presentation. That's going to be limited to 15 minutes. And I'll ask everybody who's testifying tonight to clearly provide their name and their address so that the recording can pick it up. Then we'll move to a neighborhood report if there is any. That's going to be limited in time to about 10 minutes. We'll move to general testimony in favor and in opposition and neutral testimony too. Again, give your name and address, and all of that testimony, each person will be limited to 5 minutes. Then we'll go to rebuttal by the applicant. That'll be limited in scope to issues raised in opposition. The applicant has the burden of proof and persuasion, so they'll get the last word, and we'll close the public hearing. At the end of the hearings process, the applicant gets 7 additional days to provide additional written argument. Can't be new evidence, facts, or documents other than an argument regarding information that's already in the record. And that again goes to the burden of proof that the applicant has. People testifying tonight may request a continuance to address additional documents or evidence submitted in favor of the application. If this request is made, please identify the new document or evidence during your testimony, and I'll determine whether a continuance is warranted. People testifying may also request that the record remain open for 7 additional days to submit written evidence. If that happens, then we'll close the hearing, but we won't close the record, and we'll end up extending things out so that, again, there's a period for rebuttal. I want to direct your attention to the applicable criteria found in the notice. Testimony and evidence for the public hearing really have to be directed towards these criteria. This is what I'll be using to make my decision, and it's really all I can use to make a decision on. And I will say, I've looked at some of the written comments that have come in, and I do appreciate the reference to criteria. It's going to be very helpful to me. So tonight we have a quasi-judicial zone change pursuant to SRC 265.005 sub E. An application for a quasi-judicial zone change shall be granted if the following criteria are met. 1, quasi-judicial zone change shall be granted if all of the following criteria are met. A, zone change is justified based on the existence of one or more of the following. Sub 1, a mistake in the application of a land use designation to the property. Sub 2, a demonstration that there's been a change in the economic, demographic, or physical character of the vicinity, such that the proposed zone would be compatible with the vicinity's development pattern. Or 3, a demonstration that the proposed zone is equally or better suited for the property than the existing zone. A proposed zone is equally or better suited for the property than an existing zone if the physical characteristics of the property are appropriate for the proposed zone and the uses allowed by the proposed zone are logical with the surrounding land uses. B, if the zone change is city initiated and the change is for other than city-owned property, the zone change is in the public interest and would be of general benefit. And C, the zone change complies with the applicable provisions of the Salem Area Comprehensive Plan. D, the zone change complies with applicable statewide planning goals and applicable administrative rules adopted by the Development of Land Conservation and Development. E, if the zone change requires a comprehensive plan change from an industrial designation to a non-industrial designation, or a comprehensive plan change from a commercial or employment designation to any other designation, a demonstration that the proposed zone change is consistent with the most recent economic opportunities analysis and the parts of the comprehensive plan which address the provision of land for economic development and employment growth, or be accompanied by an amendment to the comprehensive plan to address the proposed zone change, or include both the demonstration and an amendment to the comprehensive plan. F, the zone change does not significantly affect a transportation facility, or if the zone change would significantly affect a transportation facility, the significant effects can be adequately addressed through the measures associated with or conditions imposed on the zone change. G, the property is currently served or is capable of being served with public facilities and services necessary to support the uses allowed by the proposed zone. And then 2, the greater the impact of the proposed zone change on the area, the greater the burden on the applicant to demonstrate that the criteria are satisfied. Now, before we move into the staff report and testimony, I want to remind people who testified tonight that failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the city or other parties the opportunities to respond to the issue precludes appeals to the State Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. So if there's a point that you want to make about this, this is the time and place to do it, or you may not be able to do so later. Failure of the applicant, and I don't think that applies in this case, but failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues related to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Now, to everybody who's here tonight, are there any objections on jurisdictional grounds on the holding of this hearing? Meaning that this isn't the kind of thing that ought to be in front of the hearings officer. If you do have an objection, I'll ask you to state that during your testimony as well. This is ZC 20-02, 5730 Culver Drive Southeast. We have the staff report, Mr. Panko.
Thank you. Good evening. Can you see my screen here? And can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
All right. Yeah. Good evening. My name's Aaron Penko with the Planning Division. We are here tonight for a zone change, case number ZC 20-02 for property at Culver Drive Southeast. At this time, I'd like to enter into the record the staff report, including its attachments, the PowerPoint presentation, and the testimony that has been sent to us.
Okay, and we'll enter all of that. I think the testimony that's been sent to us is Lisa Rosenberg, dated 1/27/21, Charlene Gust, I think 1/25/21, Michael and Christina Wheeler, and there were 2 letters or emails, 1/18/21 and 1/24/21. Is that the list you have too?
That's correct. Yes.
Very good. So all of those will be entered into the record.
All right. So this is a vicinity map of the property. Property is approximately 29.5 acres in size. The property has frontage along Gaffin Road Southeast. This is designated as a minor arterial street in the Salem Transportation System Plan. The property also has frontage along Culver Drive Southeast. This street is in county jurisdiction. It's under the jurisdiction of Marion County, designated, I believe, as a local street. And then Gaia Street, an internal street within the Salem Business Campus, is a local street. And this is a zoning map for the property. The property is currently zoned IBC, Industrial Business Campus. The Salem Business Campus does include a few other properties nearby. So it included the former Panasonic or Sanyo solar manufacturing building that was recently converted to an Amazon distribution facility. And then there's also Portland General Electric. They have a substation out here at this campus. But those properties are not part of this request. The property is at the boundary of the urban growth boundary, right up to that boundary. Properties on the south side of Gaffin Road are in city limits, and they have industrial zoning, When you get across Highway 22, there's some public zoning and some residential zoning. And the properties surrounding it that are in the county have an SA, Special Agriculture zoning designation. So this is a map showing recent tentative approval that was granted for the Salem Business Campus to subdivide the property or the remaining portions of that property into 8 lots. 2 of those lots are going to be conservation lots, totaling about 18 acres in size. So the requested zone change here is for lots 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, and 8, as highlighted on this plan. And as I mentioned, there's no change proposed to the Amazon site or PGE. And then the conservation lots are not part of this request. They'll retain their current IBC zoning. And this is an aerial photo of the site. So the property is undeveloped. There are some significant Oregon white oak groves on the property. The purpose behind those conservation lots is to, again, retain some of those natural features. There are some waterways that go through the property, and then several significant trees. And we have a photo here. This is taken on Gaia, that internal street, looking north towards some of the vacant property. And you can see some of the oak groves in the background there. And this is just another view of the property. So this photo is actually taken a while back. The Panasonic site has been improved since. There's a large vehicle storage area and canopy for the Amazon distribution. And there have been some improvements along Gaffin Road and Gaia that aren't shown on this photo. So the request here is for a zone change for a portion of the property at Salem Business Campus from IBC, Industrial Business Campus, to IG, General Industrial. The applicant explains that the proposal is partially based on economic forces in the region. They've identified demand along the I-5 corridor as for more shovel-ready industrial land for manufacturing and heavy manufacturing uses. Now, the city does own this property, and they've been trying to actively market the property for quite some time now, but haven't found success, and that's partly due to the current zoning of the property. The applicant also explains that the proposed IG zone is equally or better suited for the property. Both the current IBC zone and the proposed IG zone are designations that implement the Industrial Comprehensive Plan designation. The zones offer a similar set of permitted uses. However, the IG zone allows some more opportunities for motor vehicle sales and services, manufacturing uses, and it also doesn't restrict activities that are conducted outside of an enclosed building. Staff is recommending in the condition of approval that we keep some of the more robust setback standards and landscaping standards that we find in the current IBC zone. So those can be adopted and carried forward as development standards for any development that comes in after the zone change here. The property is located within the Southeast Mill Creek Neighborhood Association, also known as SEMCA. No comments were received from SEMCA. Notice of the zone change request was also provided to surrounding property owners and addresses. Several comments have been received in opposition to this request, and those have been included into the record. I will touch on just a few things that were raised. The first comment was about heavy manufacturing uses potentially being allowed out here. And while heavy manufacturing is allowed in the IG zone, it does require a conditional use permit before heavy manufacturing use could be approved. And the purpose of the conditional use permit here is to ensure that there's a process for the applicant to demonstrate that the use is reasonably compatible with the surrounding area and that any adverse impacts could be minimized. Another issue that was raised has to do with Gaia Street and the connectivity between Gaffin Road and Culver Drive. That's not part of this zone change request tonight. Like I mentioned earlier, the Salem Business Campus has received subdivision tentative approval, and the connection between Gaffin and Gaffin and Culver by Gaia Street is a condition of that subdivision approval. So that's not really part of our scope tonight. And then finally, we mentioned that one of the conditions of approval for the zone change would include those setback and landscaping standards from the current IBC zone be carried forward with this zone change application. So that hopefully addresses some of the concerns that were raised about the change in development standards, change in building setbacks from what was previously there with the IBC zoning. So staff is recommending that the hearings officer approve the zone change request subject to that recommended condition of approval. Thank you.
Just a couple of kind of preliminary questions. Are the adjoining nearby special agriculture zoned properties in the county, are they in the urban growth boundary?
No, they're not.
Okay.
So I have a map here that shows the boundary. It's in that kind of red and black line. So it does border our subject property. So everything that's not shaded in with that coloring there is outside of the urban growth boundary.
Very good. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So would the applicant like to make a presentation?
Thank you, Aaron. Tori Banford with the City of Salem Urban Development Department. Can you hear me all right? I think I turned it on.
Thank you.
Annie Gorski is the Economic Development Manager with the Urban Development Department as well, and she joins me. As Aaron mentioned, this is industrial property in the urban growth boundary adjacent to other industrial zoned property in the city. The Salem Business Campus is a community investment in job growth and diversification. The City of Salem has prepared the property for development since the early 2000s by extending public infrastructure, private utilities, followed by constructing a substation and extending natural gas and communication lines. The zone change is critical to meeting market demand. Prospective buyers are interested in smaller lots ranging between 2 acres to 8 acres. So smaller lots mean smaller buildings and operations. Conditions, covenants, and restrictions limit the uses to trade or sector, meaning goods and services sold locally, regionally, nationally, and internationally. Things like professional services, general manufacturing, warehouse distribution, etc. Industrial buildings are anticipated, but they'll be balanced by the natural environment, along with the setbacks and buffer yards. There's around 20 acres of protected open space, 11 acres in the center of the subdivision, and around 9 acres in the north corner of the property adjacent to Culver Drive, southeast, to conserve the wetlands and clusters of Oregon white oaks. Thank you again for having us out.
Okay, I think it would be useful to me to know are there specific uses allowed in the GI zone that are not allowed in the IBC that due to market changes or some other change of some kind, this property is better suited for the new zone, or equally suited? I understand it's been difficult to market. I guess I'm looking for something more than that.
So we have had to turn away manufacturers in the past over this last several years. I couldn't tell you the number. Maybe Annie has a better understanding of that. But we have had challenges, as have real estate brokers throughout the city. IBC zoning designation is diminishing throughout the city. So I think that we've shared in the difficulty in matching the uses allowed in the IBC zone. So that's why we're gravitating towards the IG. So it does allow for other manufacturing uses, again, that haven't been supported that we've had to turn away. And we also have a prospective buyer that's looking at doing inside a building facility, auto detailing. So there are different uses that we're responding to. That's why we bring up the market interest.
Okay.
Would it be okay if this is Annie also with the city, would it be okay if I just add one thing or?
Absolutely.
Okay. I think the only thing that I would add is just, I don't know if this is helpful, but in general, there is not a lot of shovel-ready industrial land that is available for smaller uses, like we're seeing the demand for here. So, in other parts of Salem, there is not. We're hearing from brokers, we're hearing from businesses that want to locate, and this is the place right now that's available. There may be some smaller lots that may have wetlands or other issues where they're not development ready. But if it's someone that wants to move in and start operations in the next year or two, we're somewhat limited in the city and actually within the I-5 corridor.
So as you talk about smaller uses, what is that? What would that mean? You mean smaller in terms of like number of employees or size of buildings or what?
My apologies. Yeah, I'm referring to the footprint and the acreage requirement that these businesses are looking for. So ultimately, smaller lot sizes, that's one of the reasons we've modified our subdivision, although it's separate from what we're discussing tonight. We've moved to between 2 and 8 acre parcels, smaller buildings, and generally employers of, with a smaller number of employers, correct.
Okay. Anything else for the applicant? Okay, with that then, I don't think we have anybody here from the neighborhood association.
No, there's no one from the neighborhood association. And we have 3 people here for public comment. I believe all of them are in opposition, but I'm not 100% sure.
Okay, well, we'll run through very quickly. Is there anybody who wants to speak in favor of the application? Hearing no takers, we'll move to testimony in opposition. Again, I'm going to ask you to state your name and your address so that the recording picks it up. And we'll limit time to about 5 minutes. That's actually a really long time. So, Zachary, do you have a list in some kind of order?
Sure. We can start. We can just do the order I think that they signed up. So that would be first is Michael Wheeler.
Mr. Wheeler, I see you're muted. Can you?
Yes, hello.
Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you. Loud and clear, I'm guessing. Well, thank you for listening to this. Mike Wheeler at 5975 Culver Drive, Southeast. We are directly southeast of the subject. I will admit directions get backwards here because Culver's a crooked road, so diagonal road. And I had noticed even the applicant got one direction wrong, but anyway, I submitted, my wife and I, Christina, submitted 2 written testimonies, and I was assured, because I asked this, we are new to this, so forgive us, nervous and whatnot, but I was assured that I wouldn't need to just read those comments, that they were in the record and you have reviewed them.
I actually did read them both today. I'll probably read them again as I'm working through things. And I have to say, I appreciate your tying things directly to criteria in your letter. That's very helpful to me as I go through the analysis that I'm required to go through.
You bet. So for this, I just wanted to be brief as well, just a few bulleted comments, and appreciate what's been presented. But in summary, we purchased this property based on the zoning, what is and was the existing zoning of the subject. I'm familiar with impacts of zoning to rural properties in particular. I probably would not have purchased this property if it was even labeled general industrial, just for what that implies, and include, that that one word of heavy manufacturing is troubling. There's a reason that the existing zoning was placed originally, as it's more, I believe it's more compatible, or it's more compatible with 3 sides bordered by special agriculture. There's a reason they want to change this zoning that allows uses that are currently prohibited. I believe this could include certain chemicals or other pollutants that can harm neighboring properties. I really appreciate, and I don't know if it got in the record, but I know Annie responded back to one of my letters, and the comments were appreciated, but it doesn't address the future impacts of a zoning change. I see that to be allowing the zoning change impacts what could happen in the future, not just what potentially now. And, so you pick the best neighbors possible now, and they follow existing covenant codes and restrictions. 12 months from now, they're out of business, sell to somebody else, and it's a whole different process of, applying for change of uses, change to covenants. From that aspect, I would question why there couldn't be a variance if you have one particular use that doesn't apply to IBC, which we thoroughly recognized when I bought this. I thoroughly reviewed what was allowed and appreciated the covenants and restrictions, which was the only reason we bought the place. Why couldn't some variance be developed for a single use that was user that was determined to be a good neighbor? And I just thought, just change the rules of the games that have been implemented just because it's easier. I know they are going to argue about the economic change of the area and stuff, but I comment in my letter why I assert a different view of that, even though I'm not a commercial expert. I see what's going on. I'm aware of specific scenarios that I address and believe I could evaluate better uses or at least as good uses for the property that doesn't require the zone change. We have time. Oh yeah, it goes fast. Anyway, I would just say that please consider not to decide to allow the zone change, and I would definitely prefer to answer questions and make statements.
Okay. I do have a couple of questions for you, really based from your written materials. You asked to have a continuance. That's not, I'll tell you that the trade-off in Oregon land use is applicants get an expedited process. Public gets an opportunity to participate, and local governments get the opportunity to make decisions. But there's a very tight timeline of 120 days from the time that the application comes in, and there are consequences if we don't get a decision made, the final decision by the city within that time. That includes appeal to the council. A continuance would mean that we would come back to this forum, and I haven't seen anything today where there's a new document that's in today that people didn't have more time. If, as I said earlier in the hearing, if you would like additional time to submit additional written information, you can ask to have the record held open, and that'll extend things out. You'd have another week to submit things. And I'm really focused on, you asked for a continuance. I don't think that's in the cards tonight, and I'm trying to figure out if holding the record open would accomplish what you want to accomplish.
Yeah, so my question there is, yeah, I don't know the legalese stuff. I was just trying to follow what was laid out in the letter, that it could be continued. So that considering that the burden of proof is on the applicant, I just think that my points disagree with that. And my only question, I guess, to dragging it out, because I see it as a total uphill battle, but is it my understanding now too that no other comments can be, when you say written, is that limited to my written comments or others' written comments?
Well, if we hold the record open, we would probably hold the record open for anybody who wants to comment within the first week. Then we'd have a second week where people can rebut what other people have written. And then we'd still have that third week for the applicant to submit a final written argument.
Okay, so yes, I guess at a minimum, I would request that time opportunity, especially considering just how this quickly materialized on us.
Okay, well, we're going to do that. So and I guess that's the other clarification, is all you have to do is ask about that, and we'll get it. And I kind of thought from your letter, that's what you were looking for, was a little more time. And here's a little
Very
more.
good.
As I said, I've read your letters. I've read both of them. Certainly take your point that you purchased your property and you moved there, understanding what the zoning of surrounding properties was and what those impacts might be. Things do change sometimes. I guess what I'm thinking about is, have conditions not changed in, and again, maybe I'm trying to put words into your mouth based on both what you've said tonight and your letters. Is your thought that conditions really haven't changed regarding this property at all?
Correct.
Okay.
Especially the immediate, especially my argument about vicinity. So they call a vicinity I-5 corridor, or even the development that's occurred to the south in Mill Creek, that's not impactful from this business park, at least on the physical characteristics. I understand the economics, the city wants jobs, but the existing uses allow for that. I mean, the existing zoning, they just haven't been successful in landing the right fish. And I argue there might be many reasons why that is. I mean, it always comes down to cost and money. So that's my argument.
Okay. Well, I appreciate your participation. Again, I want to compliment you on going to the criteria. That's what's useful to me. And I'd encourage you, as we hold the record open, to continue doing that focus on the criteria that are in the notice. While we talked about just going through testimony in order, I think it's still your time if you've got any final point you want to make. Because I see Christina Wheeler also on your name, I'm
Yes.
thinking instead of leaving you to another person and coming back, maybe Christina Wheeler would also like to just move to her 5 minutes.
Sure. My name is Christina Wheeler, and this is our address at 59.
I cannot hear you, ma'am.
Go closer.
I'm sorry. I am Christina Wheeler, and we're at 5975 Culver Drive. We're just across the street, basically, of the business park. We have blueberries that we operate as a U-Pick farm during the summer. And the appeal of living in this area is being surrounded by agriculture. It's also part of what attracts our customers. The whole area on this side of the street anyway, and around the park, is made up of residences surrounded by fields of blueberries and hay, nursery stock, sheep, goats, chickens, horses. The oddball one is in the area is the business park across the street. And the change in zoning in the business park causes great concern because it would allow for activities that have the potential of disrupting our quiet and natural agricultural neighborhood. The same, even if the current applicant might not have the impact if they move out, then it just opens the doors for other businesses to the potential impacts with increased noise and smells and lights and traffic. As a sample, even the Amazon warehouse currently there already creates a huge impact with their constant honking. It's annoying noise. So we wouldn't want to allow other businesses with a similar or potentially worse impact in our quality of in our neighborhood and our daily lives. And I'm also concerned how this notice quickly came and how many of our neighbors that could be impacted are really aware of the proposal. It seems that the letter didn't go very far along the street, and some might not even know about this. So I also oppose a change of zoning and would urge you not to approve it. And thank you.
Thank you. I guess as I think about the presentation this evening and your comments, I do have a question for you. Does the city's commitment to leave in place at the buffers and the setbacks, does that help address any of your concerns?
I honestly I'm not sure how that, I can't picture it. I'm not sure.
Okay. Anything else this evening?
Not for me.
Well, thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Wheeler. Appreciate you participating. And then we should have.
The final person is Stephanie Milton.
Thank you. And Ms. Milton, I think you're muted.
Hello.
Hello, I can hear you.
Thank you. Shall I proceed?
You may
ahead.
proceed. Yes, please.
My name is Stephanie Melton. My address is 5825 Culver Drive, Southeast, and my property line is right across the street from Lot 5 and part of Lot 6. And I am in opposition at this point for a number of reasons, and I'll just go through the scope of today's hearing. 265.005 sub 1. I won't spend any time on that because the applicant doesn't identify a mistake. Sub 2, the applicant has the burden of proof to present a demonstration of change in the economic, demographic, or physical character. The response to that burden of proof is the applicant makes statements that IG and IBC are both industrial. That is true. That's not fulfilling a burden of proof. That's just a statement of a zone, two zones. The applicant states that the change is compatible with the vicinity. I agree with everything that Mr. Wheeler said. The vicinity is not specific to the Gaffin Road industrial strip. It is the vicinity is special ag. The applicant mentions market demand and describes that potential users and turning away users. The applicant also states this zone of this property has been challenging from the beginning. The applicant states demand for IG is related to market forces and not necessarily economic or physical character. Those statements in and of themselves are statements, and from my perspective, the burden of proof and preponderance of evidence has not been met. On subject 3 or sub 3, the applicant is to provide evidence regarding the proposed change is equally or better suited for property than existing zone. The applicant states the two zone issues, they're both industrial zones. The applicant restates the market need. The applicant restates states specifically IG is better suited for vicinity. The applicant states surrounding areas IG, and that includes business parking, trailer storage, ag, and auto repair. That surrounding area that is cited in that statement is again specific to that strip of IG property on Gaffin Road. To be clear, Culver is special ag as the Wheelers described, and there's three sides of the property that are really, to my knowledge, aside from the PGA plant, are still considered agricultural. In closing, I want to, if I may, address that my understanding of this process is that it is the applicant's burden of proof to answer the questions regarding the zone change and address the issues related to the potentially heavier demands on the environment, on traffic, and on public facilities. And in closing, I spent a number of hours doing a comparative analysis of the two zones. I did a comparative analysis of the setbacks from 40 feet to 5 feet. I spoke with the applicant a number of times. I spoke with the applicant specifically regarding my concerns about the water quality that could be impacted related to specifically a business such as industrial cleaning. And the majority of my neighbors, and we can verify this because I assure you that the neighborhood will be holding a meeting soon, we're on well water. And so what goes into our groundwater is of significance to us. And it is more important than market need. And we're talking about small lots, as the applicant stated. And surely, I think in the applicant's staffing report and findings, facts and findings, there was reference to a kind of what seemed to be a surplus of industrial IG property available. And there are many, many vacant buildings around the perimeter of Salem. So I'm not convinced that this piece of property that is wetland, that has been zoned light industrial, then business industrial, for the 22 years that I've lived here, nothing has changed. And to Mr. Wheeler's point, the comparison of the two zones, there are opportunities for small business owners under the current IBC to come in and be a welcome part of the neighborhood, just like when Samuel came in. And, you know, the excitement about the Green Industry Park was a real thing. Jobs, that's good. We want jobs. I digress a little bit. I want to address or just touch real quickly, and I hope it's appropriate and just taken for face value. Today I learned that actually the applicant is in a contract with a purchaser, and the contract is written under IG. And with that information, I set aside all of the research and analysis that I did because I know in 5 minutes I can't really tackle that problem at the level that I know I could had I been given more time. But with this information today about a contract already in the works, zoned as IG, that is a demonstration of inequity in the process. Culver Drive residents deserve better than that. We are a diverse community. We deserve an equitable approach to this process. And I feel like the market need is driving the city of Salem hopes to get rid of this problem child property. As the applicant stated, this property has been difficult or challenging from the beginning. And I just don't think that it's an equitable or righteous, integrity-driven process to just hope that none of the community of Culver Drive just looks the other way. To Mrs. Wheeler's point about the notice, I received my notice very late. I didn't get my notice until January 14th. The posting of the hearing was posted, I think they want to say that it was posted on the 15th. It was posted this last weekend, and it was posted lateral to the Culver Drive. Culver Drive is a road that is narrow and has no shoulder. Somebody did change the sign. I'm assuming one of our neighbors turned the sign to where maybe people traveling in one direction might be able to see that. But, you know, it's so small and there's no shoulder. There's no safe place to pull over and read. The correct and equitable thing to do would have been to hang that notice on the fence where people could see it and it would catch their eye. So I just don't feel like this process, I value due process. I value the administrative review process. And I feel like with what I've learned today, that somehow maybe there was a leap of faith made by the city that nobody on Culver Drive would step up and oppose this. Because everybody has been, as Mr. Wheeler stated, fairly comfortable with the IBC and the phase changes. None of us like the fact that Gaia is going to be punching through to Culver Drive. That's not good for any of our property values. But a zone change that results in 5-foot setbacks and expanded right-of-way and less environmental controls is certainly not something that I would support. Even with, and I think you're going to ask me this, even with the condition of the setbacks and the development specification or requirements, that to me is like a quid pro quo. Like, you accept this, go along with the zone change, because in the applicant's document or the staffing report, it says specifically the setback or the change in the setback requirements in IG shall reflect what's in the IBC, but then it also goes on to say it may change. So, you know, there's some pretty distinct legal holdings to the word shall and may. And with the fact that if it's true, and I hope the applicant can respond to this so that we can all just air this now, if it is true that there's a contract already signed with the zoning IG, I'm not sure that I would trust that a variance to the IB or the IG standards and setbacks would be held to more than 5 minutes after a contract were signed. And I close my statement. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you for testifying tonight. I was going to ask you about the setbacks. I appreciate your thinking about that in advance. I will say the record's going to be held open for a week for additional comments and then another week for written rebuttal. So if you have more points that you want to make, you're going to have an opportunity to do that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay, do you have any other testimony? I think that's everybody who signed up.
That is everyone here.
So I will assume there is no neutral testimony. Does the applicant wish to make a rebuttal tonight?
We can speak to the comment or the concern about the contract, if that's appropriate here.
Sure.
So yes, we have a company that, a local business that contacted us through a broker that would like to locate on the property close to Gaffin Road. And their use is not currently allowed. So that contract includes a number of conditions. And one of those, you know, and those conditions must be met before the parties, the seller and the buyer, agreed to move forward. And one of those conditions is approval of the zone change. So if the zone change is not approved, that use will not be moving forward. right? We were simply, so that is the way it's worded. There's no guarantees. There's no, certainly no guarantee to that applicant that, or to that business that, that this would be approved or that the sale is final. It is a contract, a purchase and sale agreement with conditions.
May I ask a clarifying question?
We really don't do kind of a back and forth.
Okay,
But
thank you.
it would be entirely appropriate for you to submit that in writing during the time that the record is open.
I surely will. Thank you.
Any other rebuttal by the applicant? I'm not. Okay. So we have had a request to have the record held open. I think that puts us on for additional written things until February 3rd. We would call that 5 o'clock if you could get things in by then. Then we'll have rebuttal by anybody for any of the stuff that was put in during that period. That would get us to February 10th, I think. And then the applicant would have until 5 p.m. on February, and this is where I don't have enough. Is that the 17th?
17th, yes.
Thank you. I want to thank the people who participated tonight. I do really appreciate what I thought was thoughtful testimony directed towards criteria that will make my job easier. It's an important process for the city to have public participation, and I think this was successful for those purposes. I look forward to seeing the written materials, and it is open to anyone who wants to submit written material during that time period. What have I left out, either Mr. Penko or Zachary?
I think you covered it.
Okay, thank you, everyone. With that, that is all that we have on the agenda tonight, and this hearing is now closed.
Thank you.
Thank you.